"You don't deserve anything," his son said, and I smiled and nodded. The lawyer's office felt smaller than it should have, considering how much money was about to change hands. Marcus sat across from me, his father's jaw and his mother's cold eyes, while the mahogany table between us reflected the overhead lights like a dark mirror. I could see my own face in its surface, calm, composed, wearing the same gentle expression I'd perfected over 7 years of marriage to his father. "Mrs. Whitmore," the lawyer began, adjusting his glasses with the careful precision of a man who'd delivered bad news before. "Your husband's will is quite specific." I folded my hands in my lap, the way Richard had taught me. "A lady never fidgets, Catherine. A lady waits." Even now, 3 weeks after the funeral, I could hear his voice coaching me through this moment he'd orchestrated from beyond the grave. Marcus leaned forward, his expensive suit creaking with the movement. "Just read it, Henderson. Let's get this over with." The lawyer cleared his throat. "To my son Marcus, I leave the family business, Whitmore Industries, along with all associated assets and properties. The downtown office building, the manufacturing facilities, and the board positions all yours, as they should be." A smile played at the corners of Marcus's mouth. He'd been waiting for this moment since the day I'd walked into their lives. A 28-year-old nobody who'd somehow convinced his 60-year-old father to marry her. In his mind, I was the gold digger who'd stolen 7 years of his inheritance. Today, justice would be served. "To my wife Catherine," Henderson continued, and the room went silent except for the tick of an antique clock on the wall. "I leave... Marcus sat back, confident. I remained still, my hands steady in my lap. "I leave the house on Maple Street, the one where we spent our honeymoon week, the cottage by the lake. I leave her my personal library, my collection of first edition novels, and... double quotes." Henderson paused, looking up at both of us. "My private safe deposit box, number 847 at First National Bank, along with all its contents." The silence stretched like a held breath. Marcus's confidence flickered, just for a moment. "That's it?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a note of confusion rather than triumph. "There's more," Henderson said quietly. "Your father included a letter for each of you. Mrs. Whitmore, yours is to be read privately. Marcus, your father requested that yours be read aloud now." He handed Marcus a cream-colored envelope with his name written in Richard's careful script. Marcus tore it open with more force than necessary, unfolded the single page, and began to read silently. I watched his face change, confusion, melting into something harder, more uncertain. "What does it say?" I asked, my voice soft as morning rain. Marcus looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he seemed young, vulnerable. He says he's proud of the man I've become, that the business will be in good hands, that he trusts me to do the right thing. "That sounds like your father," I said, and meant it. "But then he says... double quotes." Marcus's voice caught slightly. "He says he hopes I'll understand someday why he made the choices he did. That love isn't always what it appears to be, and neither is sacrifice." Henderson cleared his throat again. "There's one final provision. Mrs. Whitmore, your husband established a trust fund in your name to be administered by you alone. The amount... he consulted his papers. $200,000 to be used at your discretion." Marcus stared at me across the table. "200,000? That's nothing. The business alone is worth $50 million. I smiled the same gentle smile I'd given him at the beginning. "Your father was very generous." "Generous." Marcus's voice rose. "Catherine, you could contest this. Any lawyer would take the case. You were married to him for 7 years. You're entitled to more." "Am I?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Entitled to what? Exactly." "Half of everything." "Community property laws," Marcus I interrupted, my voice still soft, but carrying something new beneath it, something that made him stop talking. "Do you think your father was a foolish man?" "No, of course not. Do you think he didn't understand the law, didn't have the best legal advice money could buy?" Marcus glanced at Henderson, who remained diplomatically silent. Then perhaps, I continued, you should trust that he knew exactly what he was doing. I stood, smoothing my black dress, the same one I'd worn to the funeral, where Marcus had whispered to his friends that I was probably already planning my next wedding. Mr. Henderson, when can I access the safe deposit box? Immediately, if you'd like. I have the key here, and the cottage. The deed will be transferred within the week. I nodded, then turned to Marcus. Your father loved you very much. He talked about you constantly, your successes, your intelligence, your strength. He was so proud. Marcus's anger seemed to deflate slightly. Then why? Why did he leave me so little? I finished for him. Maybe that's not the right question. I picked up my purse, a simple black leather bag that had seen better days. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Marcus, I hope you'll be very happy with the business. Your father built something remarkable. Catherine, wait. Marcus stood as I reached the door. I don't understand any of this. I turned back, and for a moment, I let him see something real in my eyes. Not the gentle, accommodating woman he'd known, but something deeper, something that had been waiting, quietly, for 7 years. Your father once told me that the most important things in life can't be inherited, I said. They have to be earned. What's that supposed to mean? I suppose you'll find out. I left them there, Marcus staring after me with questions he couldn't voice. Henderson shuffling papers with the efficient discomfort of a man who'd witnessed family drama countless times before. The elevator carried me down 12 floors in silence, and when the doors opened to the lobby, I stepped out into a world that looked exactly the same but felt entirely different. Outside, the October air was crisp, with the promise of winter. I walked to my car, a modest sedan that Marcus had always looked at with barely concealed disdain, and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. In my purse, Richard's letter waited, unread. The key to safe deposit box 847 rested against it, small and silver and heavy with possibility. The cottage by the lake, where Richard and I had spent one perfect week 7 years ago, was now mine. $200,000, enough to live quietly, modestly, for years. Marcus thought I'd been cheated. Henderson probably thought the same. They saw a young widow who'd been given scraps from a rich man's table, dismissed and discarded after 7 years of service. They had no idea what Richard and I had really built together in those 7 years, what we'd planned for, what we'd protected. I started the car and pulled into traffic, leaving the law office and Marcus's confusion behind. Tonight, I would drive to the cottage. Tonight, I would read Richard's letter and open the safe deposit box. Tonight, I would finally understand the last gift my husband had left me. But first, I had one stop to make. The rain began as I pulled into the cemetery, soft drops that turned the October leaves into scattered coins across the windshield. I'd been coming here every Tuesday since the funeral, not because I needed to grieve. I'd done that while Richard was still alive, watching cancer steal him piece by piece, but because it was the one place I could think clearly. Richard's headstone was simple granite, exactly what he'd requested. Richard James Whitmore, beloved father and husband. No dates, no flowery epitaphs. He'd said dates were for bureaucrats and poetry was for people who couldn't say what they meant. I knelt beside the grave, my black dress soaking up moisture from the grass, and placed a single white rose against the stone. Not because it was romantic. Richard had preferred practical gestures to romantic ones, but because white roses had been blooming in the garden the day we'd first talked about Marcus. He looked so angry today, I said quietly, my voice barely audible above the rain, just like you said he would. The wind picked up, sending leaves skittering across the cemetery paths like whispered secrets. I pulled my coat tighter and remembered that conversation 3 years ago, when Richard's diagnosis was still new and we'd both been pretending he might beat it. Marcus will hate you when I'm gone, he'd said, not looking up from his newspaper. We were having breakfast on the sun porch, the morning light making everything golden and temporary. He already hates me, I'd replied, pouring coffee with steady hands. No, Catherine. Right now, he resents you. When I'm gone, he'll hate you. There's a difference. I'd set down the coffee pot and looked at him. Really looked at him. Even then, the cancer was starting to hollow him out, making his cheekbones sharp and his eyes too large for his face. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand what's coming. Marcus has spent his whole life believing he deserves everything simply because he's my son. He's never had to earn anything, never had to fight for anything. When I die, he'll expect to inherit not just my money, but my respect, my love, my approval. And you don't think he deserves those things? Richard had folded his newspaper with the precise movements of a man who'd spent decades making important decisions. I think he deserves the chance to earn them, just like you did. Now, kneeling in the rain beside his grave, I understood what he'd meant. Marcus had looked at me across that lawyer's table and seen exactly what he'd expected to see. A gold digger who'd been put in her place, given just enough to keep quiet but not enough to matter. He had no idea that Richard and I had spent 3 years planning for this moment, preparing for the day when Marcus would have to choose between his assumptions and the truth. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Catherine, this is Marcus. We need to talk. Can you meet me for dinner tomorrow? I'll pay." I almost laughed. Even in his confusion, he couldn't resist the small cruelty of offering to pay, as if I couldn't afford my own meal. As if the woman who'd managed his father's household budget for 7 years, who'd stretched every dollar while Richard quietly moved money into accounts Marcus knew nothing about, was suddenly destitute. I typed back, "I'm sorry, but I have plans tomorrow. Perhaps another time." His response came immediately. Plans? What plans? The presumption in those 2 words said everything about how Marcus saw me, as a woman whose time belonged to him now that his father was gone, whose schedule should revolve around his convenience. I turned off my phone without responding. The rain was getting heavier, turning the cemetery paths into small rivers. I should have left, should have driven home to my empty house and the casseroles that well-meaning neighbors kept bringing. Instead, I stayed kneeling beside Richard's grave, letting the rain soak through my coat and into my bones. "Mrs. Whitmore." I turned to find Father Mackenzie approaching, his black umbrella held high against the storm. He was the priest who'd officiated at Richard's funeral, a kind man with gentle eyes who'd somehow managed to speak about Richard's life without mentioning the obvious tension between his son and his wife. "Father," I said, starting to rise, "please don't get up on my account." He moved closer, extending the umbrella to cover both of us. "I was visiting the Hendersons. They lost their daughter last month, and I saw you here. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said automatically, then caught myself. "Actually, no, I'm not fine, but I'm not sure fine is what I'm supposed to be right now." Father Mackenzie nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Grief isn't about being fine, it's about being honest. What if being honest means admitting that you're not grieving the way people expect you to?" "What do you mean?" I looked at Richard's headstone, water streaming down the granite face like tears. "Everyone assumes I'm devastated. The young widow, left with almost nothing, mourning the loss of her security. But the truth is, I'm not mourning Richard. I'm mourning the fact that our plan is finally beginning, and he's not here to see it work." Father Mackenzie was quiet for a long moment. "What kind of plan?" "The kind that gives people exactly what they deserve," I said. "No more, no less." That sounds like justice. Does it? Or does it sound like revenge? I suppose that depends on your intentions. I stood finally, my knees stiff from kneeling on the wet ground. My intentions are to honor my husband's wishes. Everything else is just ... consequence. Father Mackenzie studied my face in the gray light. Richard was a complicated man. I knew him for 20 years, and I never felt like I truly understood him, but I always believed he was fundamentally good. He was, I said without hesitation. He was also patient and thorough, and very, very careful about justice. And you? Are you those things too? I smiled, the same gentle smile I'd given Marcus in the lawyer's office. I learned from the best. Father Mackenzie walked me to my car, his umbrella keeping the worst of the rain at bay. As I unlocked the door, he touched my arm gently. "Mrs. Whitmore, whatever Richard planned, whatever he set in motion, remember that forgiveness is always possible. For others and for yourself. Thank you, Father. But I don't think forgiveness is what's needed here. What is needed?" I got into the car and rolled down the window just enough to speak. "Understanding. Marcus needs to understand who his father really was, who I really am, who he could choose to become, and if he doesn't, if he can't, then he'll get exactly what he deserves," I said, just like Richard promised. I drove away, leaving Father Mackenzie standing in the rain, his umbrella a black dot against the gray sky. In my rearview mirror, I could see him watching me go, probably wondering if he should be worried about my soul. He needn't have bothered. Richard and I had discussed my soul at length during those long nights when the pain medication wasn't enough and sleep wouldn't come. We'd talked about justice and mercy, about love and sacrifice, about the difference between giving people what they want and giving them what they need. My soul was fine. It was Marcus's soul I was worried about. The drive to the cottage would take 2 hours, enough time to think about tomorrow and the day after that. Enough time to remember the last conversation Richard and I had shared, when he'd pressed the key to the safe deposit box into my palm and made me promise to be strong enough to see his plan through to the end. "Promise me, Catherine, promise me you won't let him take the easy way out. I promise. Promise me you'll make him choose. I promise. Promise me you'll forgive him when he finally understands." That last promise had been the hardest to make, but I'd made it anyway, because I loved Richard and because I was beginning to understand that love sometimes looked like the cruelest kindness of all. The rain followed me out of the city, drumming against the roof of my car like fingers tapping out a patient rhythm. Behind me, Marcus was probably calling his friends, telling them about the will reading, about how his father had finally put the gold digger in her place. He had no idea that the real story was just beginning. The cottage sat at the end of a gravel road like a secret waiting to be told. I'd forgotten how small it was, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, and a living room dominated by a stone fireplace that Richard had insisted on lighting every night during our honeymoon week. 7 years ago, I'd thought it was the most romantic place on earth. Now, pulling into the driveway as darkness fell, it looked like exactly what it was, a hiding place. The key still worked, though the lock protested with a rusty scrape. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it after our last visit 2 years ago. Dust sheets covered the furniture like ghosts, and the air smelled of cedar and old memories. I found the light switches by muscle memory and watched the cottage come alive around me, warm and golden and impossibly quiet. Richard's letter was still in my purse, along with the key to safe deposit box 800. I'd been carrying them around for hours like talismans, afraid to open them, afraid not to. Now, standing in the place where Richard and I had been happiest, I finally felt ready. I built a fire first. Richard had taught me how, during that honeymoon week, his hands guiding mine as we arranged kindling and newspaper. The flames caught quickly, filling the room with dancing light and the smell of burning oak. Then I settled into the old armchair by the fireplace, the one where Richard used to read to me in the evenings, and opened his letter. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, then the first part of our plan has worked exactly as we hoped. Marcus believes he's won, and you've let him believe it. I'm proud of you for that. I know how difficult it must have been to sit there and let him think you're just another gold digger who got what she deserved. By now, you're probably wondering about the safe deposit box. Tomorrow, you'll go to the bank and discover what I've really left you. But tonight, I want you to understand why. When I married you, Catherine, Marcus accused me of having a midlife crisis. He said I was a foolish old man who'd been seduced by a pretty face and a sad story. He wasn't entirely wrong. You are beautiful, and your story was heartbreaking. But what Marcus never understood was that I didn't marry you despite those things. I married you because of what you did with them. Do you remember the night we met? You were waitressing at that little diner downtown, working the late shift to pay for your mother's medical bills. I was there because I couldn't sleep. The first signs of the cancer, though I didn't know it then. You served me coffee and pie, and when I left $100 tip, you chased me into the parking lot to give it back. I can't accept this, you said. It's too much. Why? I asked. Because I didn't earn it. That's when I knew. Not that I loved you, that came later. But that you were the kind of person who understood the difference between what you want and what you deserve. The kind of person who wouldn't take something just because it was offered. Marcus has never learned that distinction. He's spent his entire life believing that wanting something is the same as deserving it. When his mother died, he wanted my attention, so he assumed he deserved it. When he graduated college, he wanted a position in the company, so he assumed he'd earned it. When I married you, he wanted you gone, so he assumed you didn't belong. I've enabled this thinking, Catherine. I've given him everything he's ever wanted, hoping he'd eventually learn to appreciate it. Instead, I've created a man who believes the world owes him whatever he desires. The business I'm leaving him is worth $50 million. The properties, the investments, the board positions, all of it represents a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and careful planning. Marcus will inherit it all, and he'll believe he deserves every penny simply because he's my son. What he doesn't know is that the business is in trouble. Has been for 2 years now. Bad investments, market changes, a few key clients who've moved on. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to require some very difficult decisions in the coming months. Decisions that will test whether Marcus has learned anything about leadership, about sacrifice, about earning what you keep. The safe deposit box contains the real financial records, the ones my accountant and I have been keeping separately. Marcus will have access to the sanitized versions, the ones that make everything look stable and profitable. But you'll have the truth. You'll know exactly how much trouble the company is really in, and exactly what needs to be done to save it. You'll also find something else in that box, Catherine, something that will give you a choice to make. I won't tell you what that choice should be. You're too smart to need my guidance, and too good to let me make moral decisions for you from beyond the grave. But I will say this, Marcus is not a bad man. He's a spoiled man, an entitled man, a man who's never had to fight for anything important. But underneath all of that, he's still the little boy who cried at his mother's funeral, who used to bring me drawings he'd made in school, who once asked me if I thought he'd ever be as good a man as I was. I told him yes, but I lied, not because I didn't believe it was possible, but because I knew it wasn't inevitable. Goodness isn't inherited, Catherine. It's chosen again and again, in moments when choosing, it costs you something you want. Marcus is about to face some of those moments. The question is whether he'll have the strength to choose correctly, or whether he'll take the easy path and blame everyone else for his failures. That's where you come in. I'm not asking you to save him. I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourself for his education, but I am asking you to give him the chance to save himself, to choose who he wants to be when everything he's taken for granted is suddenly at risk. The cottage is yours now, Catherine. It's paid for, it's private, and it's far enough from the city that you can think clearly about what comes next. The $200,000 will keep you comfortable while you decide. And the contents of the safe deposit box, well, they'll give you options. I love you, my dear wife. I've loved you since that night in the parking lot when you chased me down to return money you hadn't earned. I've loved you through 7 years of Marcus's resentment, through the cancer treatments, through the long nights when we planned for this moment. But most of all, I love you for the choice you're about to make. Whatever that choice is, I trust it completely. All my love, Richard. P.S. Check the fireplace mantle. I left you something there. I looked up from the letter, my eyes blurry with tears. I hadn't expected. The fireplace mantle was exactly as I remembered it. Rough-hewn wood, scarred from years of use. But there, tucked behind a small ceramic vase we'd bought at a local craft fair, was something that hadn't been there before. A photograph. Richard and me on our wedding day, but not the formal portraits that had been displayed at the house. This was a candid shot taken during the reception when we thought no one was looking. Richard was laughing at something I'd whispered in his ear, and I was looking at him with an expression of such pure joy that it took my breath away. On the back, in Richard's careful handwriting, "For the moments when you forget why we did this." I set the photograph on the mantel and stared into the fire, thinking about Marcus and the choice Richard had given me. Tomorrow, I would drive to the bank and open safe deposit box 847. I would learn the truth about Whitmore Industries, about the financial trouble Richard had hidden, about the difficult decisions that lay ahead. And I would find whatever else Richard had left me, the thing that would give me options, the thing that would let me choose Marcus's future as well as my own. My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. "Catherine, I've been thinking about the will. Something doesn't add up. Can we please talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "What doesn't add up? Dad was worth at least 60 million. The business, the properties, his investments. Even after taxes, you should have inherited at least 20 million. Instead, you got a cottage and pocket change. It doesn't make sense. Maybe your father knew exactly what he was doing. Or maybe his lawyers made a mistake. Catherine, I could help you contest this. We could split everything. It's only fair." I almost laughed. Marcus, offering to help me claim money he'd spent the morning insisting I didn't deserve. The same Marcus who'd told me I deserved nothing was now worried that I hadn't gotten enough. "Why would you do that?" I typed. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because Dad would have wanted you taken care of. Because maybe I was wrong about some things." There it was, the first crack in Marcus's certainty, the first sign that Richard's plan was working. Marcus was starting to question his assumptions, starting to wonder if there was more to the story than he'd understood. "That's very kind of you, Marcus, but I'm fine with what your father left me." "How can you be fine with it? It's not enough to live on." Isn't it a long pause? "Then, Catherine, what aren't you telling me?" I turned off my phone without answering and added another log to the fire. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across the roof. Inside, the cottage felt like a cocoon, warm and safe and separate from the world. Tomorrow, I would learn what Richard had really left me. Tomorrow, I would understand the full scope of the choice he'd given me. But tonight, I would sit by the fire and remember why I'd fallen in love with a man 28 years older than me, a man whose son had hated me from the moment we met. Tonight, I would prepare for the hardest part of Richard's plan, the part where I had to decide whether Marcus Whitmore deserved to be saved from himself. The bank manager, Mrs. Chen, led me through a maze of corridors to the safe deposit box vault with the efficient courtesy of someone who'd escorted many widows through this particular ritual. She didn't ask questions when I presented Richard's key and the death certificate. Didn't comment on my simple black dress or the fact that I'd arrived alone. She simply smiled professionally and opened box 847. "I'll give you privacy," she said, closing the small viewing room door behind her. The box was larger than I'd expected, and heavier. Inside, I found 3 manila envelopes, each labeled in Richard's precise handwriting. The first, financial records, Whitmore Industries. The second, personal documents, Catherine. The third, options. I opened the financial records first. Richard hadn't lied in his letter. Whitmore Industries was in serious trouble. The company that Marcus believed was worth $50 million was actually carrying $38 million in debt. Hidden through a complex web of subsidiary companies and creative accounting, the profitable contracts that should have sustained the business for years had been quietly canceled or allowed to expire. The manufacturing facilities that looked so impressive on paper were operating at a loss, kept afloat only by Richard's personal investments. According to the projections Richard's private accountant had prepared, Whitmore Industries had perhaps 6 months before bankruptcy became inevitable, unless someone made some very difficult decisions very quickly. The second envelope contained documents I'd never seen before. A birth certificate for Catherine Marie Sullivan, my maiden name, which I'd legally changed when I married Richard, but this birth certificate listed parents I'd never mentioned to anyone: James Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan Construction, and Marie Sullivan, née Whitmore. Marie Whitmore, Richard's sister. My hands shook as I read through the rest of the documents. A death certificate for Marie Sullivan, dated 29 years ago. A will leaving everything to her infant daughter, Catherine. Trust fund documents showing that James Sullivan had embezzled his daughter's inheritance before disappearing when she was 12 years old. And finally, a letter from Richard dated just 3 months after our wedding. Catherine, I know who you are. I've known since the night we met. You're my niece, Marie's daughter. The little girl I spent years searching for after your father took you and disappeared. I don't know if you remember me. You were so young when Marie died. But I remember you. I remember holding you at your mother's funeral, promising her I'd take care of you. I remember the private investigators, the false leads, the years of wondering if you were safe. When I saw you in that diner, I knew immediately. You have Marie's eyes, her smile, her stubborn independence. You also have her pride, the same pride that made her refuse my help when she married your father, the same pride that made you try to return my tip that first night. I could have told you then who I was, who you are, but I was afraid you'd think I was trying to buy your affection, trying to assuage my guilt over failing to protect you. So I courted you honestly, as a man courts a woman he admires, and I fell in love with you honestly, as a man falls in love with someone who makes him better than he was. The fact that you're my niece doesn't change how I feel about you, Catherine. It just explains why loving you felt so natural, so inevitable. Your family. You've always been family. Which brings me to Marcus. Legally, you're his cousin. Morally, you're his equal heir to everything I've built. The money your father stole from you, money that should have been yours by right, I've been quietly replacing through investments made in your name. The trust fund documents in this envelope show that you're now worth approximately $47 million, held in accounts that only you can access. Marcus doesn't know any of this. He believes you're a gold digger who seduced his father. He has no idea that you're actually the rightful heir to a fortune larger than the one he's inheriting. The choice I'm giving you is simple. You can claim what's yours. You can reveal who you really are, take your inheritance, and let Marcus face the consequences of his assumptions. Or you can choose to help him, to save the company he's about to inherit, to give him the chance to prove he's worthy of the Whitmore name. But you cannot do both. If you claim your inheritance, there won't be enough money left to save Whitmore Industries. If you save the company, you'll have to sacrifice your own financial security to do it. I won't tell you which choice to make, but I will tell you this. Marie would be proud of the woman you've become. Whatever you decide, you'll be choosing with her strength, her wisdom, and her generous heart. All my love, Uncle Richard. I sat in that small, windowless room and stared at documents that rewrote my entire understanding of my life. Richard hadn't married a young waitress out of loneliness or midlife crisis. He'd married his lost niece, the daughter of his beloved sister, the child he'd spent years searching for. Marcus wasn't just my stepson. He was my cousin. The inheritance he thought he deserved was actually smaller than the one that legally belonged to me. And the choice Richard had given me was impossible. The third envelope contained the details of that choice. Bank account numbers, investment portfolios, legal documents that would transfer $47 million into my name with a single signature. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, to never worry about anything again. But also a detailed plan for saving Whitmore Industries. A strategy that would require injecting $35 million into the company immediately. Restructuring the debt, making painful cuts to staff and operations. A plan that would work, but only if someone was willing to sacrifice their personal fortune to make it happen. My phone rang. Marcus, Catherine, where are you? I went by your house, but you weren't there. I'm taking care of some business, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What kind of business? Catherine, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about Dad knowing what he was doing. I think you're right. I think there's something I'm missing. What makes you say that? I spent the morning going through his office, looking at the company files. Everything looks good, profitable contracts, solid investments, steady growth. But something feels wrong. The numbers are too clean, too perfect. Dad was never that optimistic about anything. Marcus was smarter than I'd given him credit for. Or maybe desperation was making him more perceptive. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. I was hoping... Catherine, I know I haven't been kind to you. I know I've said things, believed things about you that were probably unfair. But you knew Dad better than anyone in these last few years. If there's something I should know, something I'm missing..." "Marcus," I said quietly, "what if I told you that everything you believe about your father's will, about me, about your inheritance, what if all of it was wrong?" A long silence. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if your father left you exactly what he thought you could handle? What if he was protecting you from something you weren't ready for?" "Protecting me from what?" I looked at the documents spread across the table in front of me, the financial records showing Whitmore Industries' true condition, the trust fund papers showing my real inheritance. The plan that could save the company if someone was willing to pay the price. "From the truth," I said. "Catherine, you're scaring me." "What truth?" "The truth about who you are, who I am, who your father really was, and what he was really trying to do." "I don't understand." "Meet me at the cottage tonight," I said. "Come alone. Don't bring lawyers or advisors or friends. Just you." "Why?" "Because it's time for you to choose who you want to be, Marcus. And you can't make that choice until you understand what you're really choosing between." I hung up before he could ask more questions, then gathered the documents and put them back in their envelopes. Mrs. Chen appeared as if by magic when I opened the viewing room door. "Will you be keeping the box?" she asked. "For now," I said. "But I may be back soon to close it." The drive back to the cottage took 2 hours. 2 hours to think about the choice Richard had given me. I could take the money that was rightfully mine, the inheritance my father had stolen, the security Richard had quietly built for me over 7 years of marriage. I could disappear, start over somewhere else, live comfortably on the interest alone, or I could save Marcus. Save the company his grandfather had built, his father had grown, and he was about to inherit. I could sacrifice my own financial future to give him the chance to prove he was worthy of the Whitmore name. The cottage looked different when I arrived, smaller somehow, as if the weight of what I'd learned had changed the scale of everything around it. I built another fire, made coffee, and sat down to wait for Marcus. He arrived just as the sun was setting, driving his expensive car too fast down the gravel road, parking at an angle that suggested either haste or anxiety. When he knocked on the door, I could see through the window that his usual confidence had been replaced by something rawer, more uncertain. "Come in," I said, opening the door. "We have a lot to talk about." Marcus stepped inside, looking around the cottage with curious eyes. "I've never been here before. Dad used to talk about this place, but he never invited me. He was saving it," I said. For tonight, I handed him a cup of coffee and gestured toward the chair across from mine. Between us, on the small table, I placed the 3 envelopes from the safe deposit box. "Marcus," I said, "before we begin, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what you learn tonight, you'll listen to everything before you react. Promise me you'll let me finish the whole story before you decide what it means." He nodded, though I could see the questions burning in his eyes. "Good," I said, and opened the first envelope. "Let me tell you about your father's real will." Marcus stared at the financial documents for a long time, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The fire crackled in the silence, casting dancing shadows across his face as he processed what he was reading. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a mixture of shock and something that might have been relief. "The company is bankrupt," he said quietly. "Or will be. Within 6 months. Yes. Dad knew this when he wrote his will. Yes. He left me a sinking ship and made it look like a gift." I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. "He left you a choice, Marcus. The same choice he's been trying to give you your whole life." "What choice?" "How to fail gracefully. How to earn what you keep." I handed him the second envelope. "Before you decide what that means, you need to know who I really am." Marcus read through the documents slowly, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief to something approaching wonder. When he reached Richard's letter explaining everything, he set it down with shaking hands. You're my cousin, he said. Yes, Dad's niece, Aunt Marie's daughter. Yes, the little girl he used to talk about sometimes, the one who disappeared. I didn't disappear, Marcus. I was taken by a father who stole my inheritance and then abandoned me when the money ran out. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I remember you, he said finally. Not clearly, but there was a little girl at Mom's funeral. Dark hair, big eyes. She held my hand during the service. You were 6 years old. I was 3. Dad looked for you. For years. He never stopped hoping he'd find me, and when he did, double quotes, he fell in love with me. Not because I was his niece, but in spite of it. Because I was a woman who'd learned to take care of herself, who understood the value of things that couldn't be bought. Marcus picked up the third envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. What's in here? Your real inheritance, I said. And mine. He read through the trust fund documents, the bank statements, the investment portfolios. When he reached the plan for saving Whitmore Industries, he looked up at me with something like awe. You're worth $47 million. Yes, more than I am, yes. And you've been letting me think you were a gold digger for 7 years. It seemed easier than explaining the truth. Marcus set down the papers and rubbed his face with both hands. I don't understand any of this. Why didn't Dad just tell me? Why the elaborate deception, the fake will, the test? Because he loved you, I said simply. Because he wanted to know that when everything was stripped away, the assumptions, the entitlement, the easy answers, you'd still choose to be a good man. By giving me a bankrupt company. By giving you the chance to save it. To fight for something, to sacrifice for something, to prove that you understand the difference between wanting something and deserving it. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents spread between us. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across the roof. The plan would work, he said finally. Injecting $35 million, restructuring the debt, cutting the dead weight, it would save the company. Yes, but it would take almost everything you have. Yes, why would you even consider it? I looked at this man who'd spent 7 years hating me, who'd assumed the worst about my motives, who'd told me just yesterday that I deserved nothing. He looked younger now, more vulnerable, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him for so long. Because your father asked me to, I said. Because the company your grandfather built deserves to survive. Because 200 people work for Whitmore Industries, and they deserve to keep their jobs. And because you're my family, Marcus, the only family I have left. He was crying now, silently, tears reflecting the firelight as they slipped down his cheeks. I've been so awful to you. You've been scared. There's a difference. I called you a gold digger. I told people you were using Dad. That you didn't belong in our family. You were protecting your father's memory, the only way you knew how. But I was wrong about everything. Yes, I said gently. You were. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so young and vulnerable that it broke my heart. What happens now? I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a bank transfer authorization that would move. $35 million from my accounts to Whitmore Industries. All it needed was my signature. Now you choose, I said, placing the paper between us. I can sign this, save the company, and give you the chance to prove you're worthy of your father's faith. Or I can walk away, take my inheritance, and let you face the consequences of 30 years of entitlement. And if you save the company, then you'll spend the next 5 years working harder than you've ever worked in your life. You'll make difficult decisions, fire people you like, sacrifice things you want. You'll learn what your father and grandfather knew, that building something worthwhile costs everything you have to give. And if you don't, then you'll learn a different lesson. That actions have consequences. That assumptions can be dangerous. That sometimes the people we dismiss are the ones who could have saved us. Marcus stared at the authorization form for a long time. Why are you giving me this choice? Why not just save the company and be done with it? Because your father was right. Goodness isn't inherited, Marcus. It's chosen. I can't choose it for you. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail? Then you'll fail having tried. That's more than you've ever done before. Marcus picked up the pen I'd placed beside the authorization form. For a moment, I thought he was going to sign it himself, to try to take the choice away from me. Instead, he set it down and looked at me with clear eyes. "Sign it," he said. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Not because I deserve it, but because I want the chance to earn it. Because I want to be the man Dad believed I could become. Because I want to be worthy of a cousin who'd sacrifice her inheritance to save me from myself." I signed the paper with a steady hand, then folded it and put it in my purse. "I'll transfer the money tomorrow. You'll have full control of the company, but I'll be watching. If you start to fail, if you fall back into old patterns, you'll let me fall." "Yes, good," Marcus said. "I wouldn't want it any other way." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Marcus stood to leave. "Catherine," he said as he reached the door, "thank you for everything, for saving the company, for giving me this chance, for being family. Thank you for choosing to be worthy of it." After he left, I sat alone in the cottage, watching the last flames flicker and die. On the mantel, the photograph of Richard and me smiled down from our wedding day, frozen in a moment of pure joy. "He chose well," I said to the empty room. "Just like you knew he would." Outside, Marcus's car disappeared down the gravel road, carrying him back to a life that would never be the same. Tomorrow, he would begin the hardest work of his life. Tomorrow, he would start earning the name Whitmore. And tomorrow, I would begin my own new life, not as a wealthy widow, but as a woman who'd chosen love over money, family over security, hope over certainty. The fire died completely, leaving only glowing coals and the soft sound of wind through the trees. I smiled in the darkness, finally understanding what Richard had known all along. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what you receive, but what you choose to give away. In the end, we all get exactly what we deserve, but only after we decide what that should be.